What's up, my people? Welcome to Fellowship Bible Church's Sermon Spotlight, where we're coming at you each and every week with a fresh weekend to debrief in an effort to send biblical truth. What better way to do that than by the power of conversation? I'm one of your hosts, Caleb Pearson, and I recently played golf with our other host, Mark Francis.
We did.
Mark, how are you?
Including your papa.
He was on the team as well.
Yeah,
and now you know how bad I am.
Now I know how good your dad is.
There you go. That's a positive spin.
A positive spin.
Thanks for being here on the podcast.
I'm here.
Joining us again, he's preached now 3 times, I think, here. Micah Dirksen, how are you?
Doing well.
Good.
Doing well.
Feel good about the weekend and
I do, yeah.
Rested and recovered? Good.
Yeah, rested now.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I want to jump right into a Sunday in review. Mark Francis, I'll come your way first as we talk about pretty big passage, Mark chapter 5, and then we'll hear what Micah has to say for us. But
I have been looking forward to this passage because I don't know if any of you went to the Good Friday service where we were able to read through the entire book of Mark. I was on the stage, and it was me and Roger Locke and Josh
shout out to Raj
that we were representing Legion. And I remember reading the passage of, our name is Legion, for we are many, together in unison. We should practice that. I mean, it was creepy. And the first time we did it in rehearsal, like everybody's like, "Oh," it's just kind of fun, So just being able to unpack this passage a little bit more is cool. But just a recap, it was VBS coming on the heels of VBS week, so being able to celebrate what the kids learned and studied over the course of the week, and then allowing the songs to reinforce what it looks like to magnify the Lord and the greatness of God, and being able to call us all to exalt his name together, I thought was a really neat introduction to the message, kind of recapping where we've been with Mark of, mighty Messiah, suffering servant, and Micah, you kind of covered it a little bit in your sermon, but just where Jesus tells the guy, he's like, go share about the greatness of God and his mercy. And you emphasize mercy, but we were able to unpack the greatness of God in that worship time and really enhance who he is and his glory. And just seeing that on display with the passage as well is really cool. So hearing that unpacked, and I'm excited about what we can talk about today. But that, to me, that was a great overall weekend where kids were involved. The parents of the kids were there, clapping for their kids, and we were able to sing some really cool songs, and just being a part of that, and the worship team was great.
Well, and the beauty of that, and Mike, I'll come your way here in a second too, the greatness of God can often accidentally be perceived as a distant God, but instead focusing on the mercy and the practical implications for us of his greatness. Mike, talk us through your preparation for this, a little bit bigger of a passage, and you mentioned kind of the preaching team dynamic. What was it like tackling this?
Yeah, it's been cool. The diversity of sermons so far. Like, this is 20 verses, and last time I preached on Mark, it was 5 or 6 verses. So it's just different unpacking all that. And you mentioned greatness of God, mercy of God. Right from the text, go and report those 2 things. So as I was studying this passage and went into our preaching team meeting where we all were able to discuss it together and look at it, I asked the guys, I said, so there's clearly 2 emphasis here, the greatness of God and the mercy of God. I'm leaning more towards emphasizing the mercy of God because up to this point, we've really been highlighting, mighty Messiah, that God has done so many great things. And I'll mention the great things, it's evident throughout the text, but what do you guys think of me landing more on the mercy side of things? And it was really cool to get all their feedback and, their blessing, if you may. So it's just really, really cool to be a part of that team and to get everyone's feedback and to be affirmed too. I believe it was Tim. He said, "Well, they're not antithetical to each other, because he's mighty, because of the great things, he is able to extend mercy." So I did try to bring that out as well. But really wanted to hone in on the mercy there. I feel like it was a special opportunity to do that.
Were there things that cutting room floor question that got left out? I mean, it is a big passage to unpack, and you're able to cover it all. more than once, kind of reading the whole thing through, then coming back to it and emphasizing each part, which was great. And I don't know how you squeeze it all in 40 minutes.
Yeah.
But so what got left behind there for us?
Well, I was telling Caleb today, I broke my streak. I had been on time the last two, but I did go over in time on this one. And like every message that we all preach, there's things you cut, and there's interesting avenues you go down in your study that you just like, what? I'd never even thought about that. Who's thinking about this as well? And just really entertaining. One thing was, I didn't entertain the question, well, what happened to the demons? Where did they go? What happened? Were they destroyed, as some people think? Did they just become disembodied and they just floated off? Like what happened to them? And the short answer is I don't know. But I'm just curious your guys' initial thoughts. When you read that passage, what comes to your guys' mind? Where did they go?
Well, Caleb, you and I've been there. Like we were on the tour together in Israel and stopped on the bus on this winding road at the top of a cliff to overlook the Sea of Galilee. And it was kind of dark at the time, I remember, and at the time, in passing, they're like, oh yeah, this is where the pigs went off the cliff. We're like, holy cow, that's a big old cliff right there. So it's no joke. I mean, they definitely ate the dust hard, But like where the demons go, who knows, right? I mean, but I think that's not the point to me of the story. Yeah. To me, the point of the story is Jesus has authority over them and tells them where to go and get out of here,
Yeah, total deliverance, right? We know that from the guy, and it's funny to do this, not funny, but interesting to do this after our spiritual warfare series, where we did kind of honestly say, here's what we know, and here's what we don't. And so I love that the moment they are removed, they are no longer the focus, and they're quite literally thrown over the edge, and the story continues. And so it can be a fun thing to think about, but I appreciate. I mean, that's a great example of something that fun to study. I don't need to spend 6 minutes talking about that in a room of 500 people who need to know Jesus.
Right.
And there is the question. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it is interesting to speculate, and there's always 5 views for every verse in the Bible.
Sure.
And some of the views were, well, first of all, in the text, verse 13, it's grammatically clear that it's the pigs that are destroyed. It's not the demons. So you can't import like, oh, they were in the pigs and they destroyed. It's very clear it was the pigs that were drowned. But there's some commentators will connect, I believe it's Matthew 12, where it says when an unclean spirit comes out of a man, they go through waterless places and then they come back. And people will take that and say, well, they go through waterless places because that's where they're able to travel. They can't travel through water. So then they take that verse and then they slap it here and they say, well, they drowned, so they were destroyed.
Yeah.
And it's entertaining. I would lean more towards no. I don't think that's true. I think it's clear they're spirits, and they're not bound by physical things like that. But it is interesting. Well, why did he say in Matthew 12 then waterless places? And you can go down that road and all that stuff. But
but there is symbolism, I feel like, in everything, and Jesus is very intentional with all of these things. And so probably what the crowds saw of, whoa, we're talking a bunch of pigs just going nosedive off the cliff, and that is impressive of the authority that Jesus has over the demons and the animals and everything going on around it. But the symbolism, so at the end of the worship time, the worship leader, I read it as well, and Mike Lukens did too, read Micah 7. And in verse 19, it says, he will again have compassion or mercy on us, and he will tread our iniquities underfoot. Yes, you will cast all their sins into the depths of the sea. So there's that symbolism of God just forgiving and having mercy and casting all of our sins over the cliff. And there's that image that I'm stuck with because I've been to this cliff. I'm like, wow, that's a really cool picture. Right. And in your sermon there, you did make some similarities and kind of took us down that path of, yes, there's what is potentially being possessed by unclean spirits, but then also the implications of our own sin. Yeah. So give us kind of unpack that a little bit more for us of why you went down that path of this is more than just demon possession. There's implications and applications for us today of the impact of sin.
Yeah. Well, I think, the audience I'm talking primarily is believers. And Scripture is clear: we cannot be possessed by demons, but we can be influenced by satanic or demonic influence. You know, Satan's the father of lies. So we're up against that, and we can be gripped by that. So I wanted to make that connection as well, that it's not just demon possession that we are up against, but in a real sense, it's spiritual influence, satanic influence. And then also I did want to connect, because Ephesians connects sin and satanic influence together. You know, we are all born following the course of this world, the prince of the power of the air, and we are also dead in our sin. So there's this connection there, and I was seeking to make it applicable, because you know, we can read about this guy, demon possessed, hopeless, and we can just say, oh wow, what a cool story, what an amazing story of deliverance. But you know, I'm not in that situation. But no, it's like, well, that's just a different type of bondage.
But when you bring out a story of your 9 or 10-year-old self
Yeah.
getting sick on candy because you knew you were sinning intentionally and eating it and had all the ramifications of that, that brings it to home.
Right.
I think everybody's going to agree you were not possessed by demons
Yeah.
to cause you to eat all that candy.
That was my choice. Yeah.
So the stark comparison of what that looked like even for you, now people are like, oh, okay, I can understand what the implications of those choices of sin and what that looks like for us.
Yeah.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And that's why I appreciate where you arrived with mercy, and your application was almost exclusively about mercy, but different elements of it. I appreciated that, because it does come down to verse 19, you know, go home to your people, report to them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he had mercy on you. It's both, like you said earlier. And so I just think that helps the magnificent and the might seem less distant, less old news, and more like practical for us now, because we get to understand that's the kind of God he's like.
Yeah. Going back to the demons going into the pigs and down the cliff, another cool thing that I was reading and thinking about was a lot of people see that the destruction of the pigs is one last effort by the demons to hinder Jesus. So they say, okay, you know, they think we can't defeat you, Jesus, but maybe we can just disrupt your ministry. You know, they think Jesus came here and he wants to minister to these people. And if he's going to free this one guy that we're all in, then he's probably going to have an impact on everyone else here. So they think, oh, if we can just destroy all these pigs, it's going to have the result of them hating him. You know, we destroyed their livelihood.
They had all their pigs. Jesus shows up. Now they don't have their pigs.
Right.
No pigs for you.
Yeah.
And that is what happens. But I think when we connect Mark 7 to this, like I tried to bring out, is that the demon's plan again is thwarted, because instead of Jesus having that direct impact on those people, he had an impact through the healed man. So that in the region, the same result that if the demons hadn't done that happened. And that those people saw the greatness of
it models that Jesus is relying on the word of his ministry too, more so than just his physical presence, his miracles. I also appreciate in verse 12 they implore him, right? Send us into the swine so that we may enter them. Implication there, they can't enter them unless Jesus allows it. And what a beautiful implication reminder that is for us when it comes to demons entering things, that there is an element of God allowing things, and they can't just hop into the pigs. They're like, please unlock the door for us to be able to it's just so funny that they're acknowledging him. And Micah brought this out in the sermon of they're acknowledging, they ask him his name, and they're acknowledging God, which is just a beautiful irony to that.
Can we stay on the pig theme for just a bit? Because it is fascinating. Again, this is an unclean animal, and you highlighted that as well. Unclean spirits with an unclean animal in a region that is Gentile, opposite of Jew. And here Jesus comes with his disciples, who are the Jewish boys who, as Mark Carey likes to put them, would have known Scripture, and we're like, okay, we're not going to touch those pigs or get near it. But the imagery of the pigs going off the cliff is that symbol of the uncleanness going away. It's also the symbol of the unclean spirits going away. But Jesus was very intentional now to the Gentile region, this Gerasenes and this Decapolis area. Unpack that a little bit more for us, because I really think that we've heard Tim Sanford use that hinge analogy of Jesus hinging and swinging. And this is another, I feel, big example and story of the first Gentile missionary, and Jesus going intentionally across the water in the boat to go to this specific region for this time to connect with this guy who has this legion. I mean, the intentionality here is very clear.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it brings up a point, like he's always cared about the Gentiles. He's focused on the nation of Israel right now, but individual Gentiles he's always cared about. Even in the Old Testament, the purpose of Israel was so that you'll be a light to the Gentiles. He focused on Israel in order to bring the Gentiles to him. God's never been exclusive of other people. And I think Jesus shows that heart here. So even in the midst, as he is still focused primarily on the nation, he's always had this pursuit for every individual. And that's so clearly seen in this individual, the most extreme person that you would think, oh, Jesus would never pursue him. But that's what he does. He doesn't go to those rich, wealthy herdsmen that could have a lot of influence and he could get in the area through them. No, he goes to the outcast, the one that they hate, and that's his door in, and it shows the intentionality there. And coming up in chapter 6, this response, it's really interesting. Caleb's gonna walk through this in chapter 6, but we have all these positive responses to Jesus by these extremes of society. This demon-possessed man, next week Mark's going to talk about this, the healed woman and the synagogue official. And then when Jesus goes back to his hometown, the response is he couldn't do any miracles there because their lack of faith.
No faith, yeah.
But here, you have a Gentile man, someone who's as far away from Jesus as you could get. He had faith. But those people who were literally in Jesus' hometown didn't have faith.
And it's also interesting how, like, up until this time, you feel like Jesus, when he's doing things, is hush-hush. He's like, don't talk about this. No, don't go tell anybody. But now here he is in a Gentile part of the world, and it's the guy who he's like, you're not going to follow me. The word implore, you said, was a very unique word that stood out. The guy's imploring Jesus to accompany him and follow him. And Jesus is like, no, the way that you're going to follow me is to go back. Go to Decapolis. Go to your hometown. Talk about the greatness of God. Talk about the great things in his mercy, which you called it out, the first Gentile missionary, right? And so that sent component is an aspect of, in that guy's world, is following him.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so encouraging thinking about this man, his story, and God chose him for a very special role. And God does that for us as well. He chooses us. And then also, it's not like, okay, I want you to go and tell your people after you've spent 3 years studying the Bible and you get all your theological T's crossed and I's dotted. It's no, you're able to be effective right now because you're just pointing people to Jesus. And for us today, like I think of 1 Corinthians 3, like, we are called to be faithful, not to bring about change in people's life. Like our job is to plant the word or water the word. It's not to convert people. Our success in evangelism is conversations, not conversions. That we are successful 100% of the time when we talk about Jesus, when we point people to Jesus, because we don't change people's hearts. God does. And we're fully equipped to do that because we've experienced the mercy of God and the greatness of God. So we can just go tell people about that. How they respond, that's not dependent on us, because God's the one that causes the growth. And that is so freeing. And it's just, we don't have to be afraid or worried, oh man, I didn't get to share the whole picture of the gospel, or they didn't seem very receptive. That's not our responsibility. It just, be faithful to share, and God's going to do the rest. And it really is freeing, and God has made each and every one of us adequate ministers of the gospel.
And what did Jesus call that guy to do? Basically tell a story.
Yeah.
Right? He didn't have, like you said, he didn't have to be this grand theologian. And what was the result of him telling the story? It literally says everyone was amazed.
Yeah.
And so they're then just growing in their understanding of God, not this person and not how great of a orator or missionary he might have been. He's just telling a story, and people are amazed. And then to your point also, in Mark 7, Jesus is back in that area, and those people had obviously grown in their faith of who he was. So when he comes back to town, Jesus is doing miracles for those people because of their faith.
Because of their faith. And we're going to see it next week, but by the time Jesus gets back to the other side, the original side, the text shows us that he's amazing people on both sides because of this guy. And one thing I appreciate, and Mike, I'm sure you do as well, as we preach through this, because we're sticking to the word and preaching it in order, it does blend together beautifully, that as you're preaching and as Mark's preaching, by the time I do speak on Mark chapter 6, the foundation's laid, because that's the order in which he did it for the believers in Rome. And so it's so cool to be able to do that each and every week here at Fellowship. Believers in Rome, believers in Winchester. Here's the truth. Here's the story of this guy. And it's been a huge encouragement to me in my studies as well. But.
Yeah. And the word, it's so deep. Like Mark, you mentioned, the cutting room floor, and there's so much that you leave out, or you could go down these different avenues and have fun speculating. Like another thing that it would be fun to bring out in a sermon, but I didn't, is this idea that in the Jewish mind, when you're doing an exorcism, a big thing that you need to do is get power over the demon by knowing their name. So there's something about if you can know someone's name, you have power over them. It kind of goes back to in the garden, God gave Adam authority to name the animals. So there's kind of that connection there. And it's interesting, the demons try to do this to Jesus. They try to
do it first.
Twist his arm. They're the ones that say Jesus' name. This is your Jesus, Son of the Most High God. They try to get
it's not them.
Power over him.
They're not mocking him. They're not worshiping him. They're potentially testing this procedure.
Or trying to basically enforce their power. Or enact power by naming him. Interesting.
So they go first, and nothing happens, and then Jesus goes, what's your name? Legion. And then it just crumbles for the demons from there. But it's just fascinating. In your study, you're just reading, and you're just getting some of that background, and it's a cool nugget of truth to share, and it does bring some light to the text. But when you have 40 minutes and you want to focus on the main point, it's got to be cut. You got to focus on other things.
But it's funny when you're looking at that, in that first interaction, what business do we have with each other? Jesus, Son of the Most High God. So they're, as you're saying, trying to get that power.
They've been saying that since Mark chapter 2, by the way. What business do we have?
Right away, he's like, I implore you, by God, do not torment me. So they're like, they already know that they're toast.
It's his power.
It's amazing.
And 2,000 demons couldn't separate this guy from the love of God, but we live our life with one doubt, one insecurity, one sin, and we think it does. It's crazy.
And what great mercy. Because, we at first glance will never liken ourselves to this guy. But we all are like that guy. We all do need that mercy from God. And this is one of the most extreme cases out there. And Jesus turned him around in an instant and sent him on his way to proclaim God's greatness.
Well, and you brought that up, Mark, that idea of sharing a story. Do you want to plug real quick just testimonials?
Man, we still need it. Absolutely. I mean, the preaching team has been requesting stories for the beginning of each sermon time. And it does not have to be this grand, massive life change. And it doesn't have to be a 35-minute sermon. It can just simply be a couple minutes of, I'm following. This is how I've grown in my understanding of what it looks like to follow Jesus. I can see following Jesus through serving in nursery, and that to me is how I felt the call to follow Jesus. It can be an example of talking to a neighbor friend. It can be an example of a coworker. You name it. Anything in your life that, we all can share a story. So it's a matter of recognizing it and then being willing to share it. And so you can just email, I don't know.
It's Natalie.
Email. Yeah, Natalie P at fbcva.org.
Or reach out to us through the podcast feed.
Yeah, just say, I'm willing to share. It's all it is. It's just be willing to share, and we understand. We're not trying to get the spotlight. We understand that that's probably going to be the biggest hindrance. Be like, I don't want to look like I'm trying to brag. It's meant to be an encouragement to the body and meant to give
Puts Jesus in the
practical
spotlight,
examples of what does it look like to follow Jesus, because everybody has a story. So absolutely, we need it for the sermons. I'm always looking for them as well for the fellowship family. If there's additional content that you're like, man, it's going to take more than just 2 minutes. We'll use that platform in the Fellowship Family podcast to talk about it. So
very good. Mark, thank you for being
Yes,
here,
sir.
brother. Appreciate it. Micah, thank you. Appreciate it. For all our listeners and viewers, remember that we love to hear from you. You can find us at fbcva.org/podcasts. The fact of the matter, everybody, is that sermons are not meant to take an hour, but rather transform a lifetime. Until next week, much love. God bless.